text, the new text, you can't copy it very easily at all. We've got better digital rights management, DRM. Well, maybe that works. So, very much in part of the strategic management process is, the SWOT analysis, is looking at our strengths and weaknesses, our opportunities and threats, looking at our resources and our capabilities. Because as we looked at in ITEC 871 with the SAM model, that the business strategy has to align with the business capability. It's no use Macquarie saying, next year we're going to be a leading online university. It's not going to happen because the capability hasn't been developed, the expertise, I fear. So there needs to be this alignment, and when the market is shifting, as it does, you need to change your capabilities, realign your capabilities. GE had this marvelous idea of becoming an industrial but also a digital company to change their capabilities, hired thousands of programmers, but overinvested and didn't deliver the clear benefits their customers were looking for. Although it'll become an important part. I mean, GE Digital, the digital arm, was always important because they've always had embedded software in the equipment that they provide. So they've always needed to be able to program. But cloud was something different for them. It's an expertise they need, but maybe they move too quickly. Maybe Siemens has more distinct. So in the discussion about Siemens last week, I was very interested in the specific use cases. I asked you by division, how can they use, ITOs specifically? Because Siemens is much clearer in how they're going to apply it. So that's a change in capability. Very much the Vario model we'll talk about, that to have significant strategic resources that give you a strategic advantage, that must be of value, but rare, inimitable, and have organizational support. This is an interesting word. There was a book written, I think, in the 1920s called The Inimitable Jeeves. It's about a butler called Jeeves who's inimitable. What does that mean? What does inimitable mean? No. Inimitable. Ah, there it is. See, comes straight up. The Inimitable Jeeves. Obviously by P.G. Wodehouse. It's a funny read. It's a funny book. When it was written, see, 1920s, 1923. 1920s. So what does inimitable mean? It's part of Vario, the Vario model. Value, rare, inimitable.
Something which can't be replicated?
Yeah, can't be imitated. Inimitable. You cannot imitate it. Because if it's easily imitated, your competition will do so. They will imitate it. And it must align with the organization, must have organizational support. Otherwise, you're wasting your money. And often with information systems, they don't have organizational support. They cause too much organizational change management. We looked at ERP, and we looked at Michael Hammer and his view in the castles, and ERP breaks down the castles. It moves authority to the front line, decision-making to the front line. It changes business processes, and organizations don't support it. Those doing ITEC 871, you've got an assignment on Lead Tech. There are three, aren't they? They don't support. Do they support the ERP? No. Was it successful? No. It's an example of not having organizational support here. So you really need executive sponsorship, strong sponsorship, as Michael Hammer. Wasn't he a good speaker? Yeah, he's very good, isn't he? Makes a break from me. Whether you liked it or not, whether you wanted it or not, this is what you're going to get. He's very, very good. So, what are resources and capabilities? What type of capabilities contribute to competitive advantage? These are the important ones. And superior performance. How do we evaluate them? And how do we develop and manage them? Some very good strategic questions. So we like to look at the resource-based view of strategy. There are different views of strategy, but the resource-based view is a very clear and simple view. So, for example, Donald Trump thinks that he's exhibiting really good strategy as the President of the United States, picking a trade war with China, and it's completely backfiring on him. So, there's a political view he has, an ideological view he has, and he's coming completely unstuck because it's illogical, ill-founded, and very one-sided. So there are many different views. That's an ideological or a political view on strategy, which can be very ill-founded. So the resource-based view has the benefit that it's objective. So the resource-based view contends that competitive advantage, superior performance of an organization are explained by its distinctiveness of its capabilities. So it's a capabilities view, but distinctive capabilities, unique capabilities. So an example I like to use, because it's a lovely hybrid strategy, is you go to Aldi, and what do you see in terms of Aldi's distinctive capabilities? What do we see there? What's distinctive about Aldi? Have you been to Aldi ever before? No, never? Most people have. That's why I use that as an example. Low prices, it's distinctive, isn't it? But normally, yes, but normally with low prices comes crappy products. Yeah, but generally the quality is high. So you walk away with a basket, a shopping trolley, full of goods. Are they bad quality things that you've bought? No. But you probably paid half what you would have paid in Coles or Woolworths. That's a very distinctive capability to be able to do that. That's very shrewd. That takes fantastic global supply chains, very, very good buying power, and conservative marketing and conservative expenses. Keep your expense base low, source well, and put a margin. Obviously, it's a very profitable business. It's a privately owned German family who own Aldi, and they're expanding and growing. So I will assume, we don't really know the profitability because it's private company, but I suggest that they're trading quite profitably. So that's a distinctive capability. And we'll look after the break at H&M. What's H&M famous for? What sort of retail? Yes, fast and cheap. Yeah, fast, cheap fashion. Fast, keeps changing all the time, but cheap. Wouldn't you call that a distinctive capability? And I'll suggest to you that IT has a role to play in developing, maintaining, and continuing that capability, but doesn't explain all of it, of course. So, our resources and capabilities, they contribute, of course, to the survival and to the competitive advantage of the organization. And resources are what we have, but our capabilities is what we do. So it's both. It's both a question of the network, our relationships, our equipment, our assets, what we have, but our processes and how we do it. That's why ERP is so important, because you want to have good capabilities, good processes.
Do resources also include employees?
Yes, of course. That's what we do. Are the ways those assets are used or deployed. So employees very much important in terms of our capability, definitely. And so how we train our staff, how we manage. If we manage them well, they're motivated. We know that motivated staff give much better customer service than demotivated staff. I like taking my car to the cheap, if you like, budget. A Midas. Midas were famous for mufflers. But there's a Midas franchise on the Pacific Highway in Chatswood. It's like 5 minutes from my apartment, so hence that was the natural place to go. So I can just drop the car off and take your time, whatever. Give me a call. Just walk back, That's the easiest. But these guys are mechanics. You know it. You know, just from because I've been dealing with them for a couple of years. They're honest, but they're very, very capable what they do. They understand cars very, very well and will tell you what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, what your choices are, and what the trade-offs are, etc. So the daughter's 86, she had a Toyota 86 and with the drums, and we machined the drums, and in time too, otherwise she'd need new brake drums on the thing, or new discs, new brake discs these days, four-wheel disc brakes and everything. But they gave us a cost-effective solution. But you can tell, they're mechanics, and I'm in the market, want to buy a new car soon. And I asked Louis, one of the partners there, so what do you think about this versus this? And I got a very good opinion in terms of the maintenance costs, which is what they see. So their processes are good because they're very skillful. It's what they do well. That's why they get customers in on their cheap servicing package, but you do bring your car back for repairs because they're capable. And we joked because I'll get a new car, right? And I checked that they can do service of the new vehicle without invalidating the warranty. Your warranty will be valid. Because the last thing you want to do is you want to take it to a dealer. The dealer will charge you 3 times as much, and they'll have 16-year-old apprentices working on it. So that's the irony of a car dealer. It's not only are their servicing costs very high, but they have low capability too. They don't invest in clever staff. It's imbeciles, It's inexperience. It's the apprentices. So definitely, we know this in small businesses, even from small to big businesses, at all levels of business. It's capability that gives you your distinctive advantage and how you'll survive. So resources, what we have, it can be machines and buildings and raw materials and patents and databases and computer systems, can be physical, it can be financial, but as Althea asked, can it be employees? Certainly. Employees, partners, suppliers, customers, the relationships and their capabilities. Sometimes our capabilities can be rigidities that inhibit change and become a weakness. So we have a rigidity here. For 50 years we've been doing chalk and talk, and there's no motivation to move in an effective way into the digital world. And we joke like, this is like 20% of the classes here at the moment, and after the break it'll be even fewer of you. And you can joke, but it's even worse or similar with the undergrads, and participation's not required now in a tutorial I'm working on, and the convener wanted marking the roll or something, and it's just too much work to try and find the right class sheets, with the names, and they're wrong anyway, and print them all off and everything. So what I did is I just drew up a grid. I just drew up a table like this. And it's group 16, 17, 19, 19. It was 24, 21, 23, and then 21, 22, 21. Not too bad. And then all 16. See, randomness is lumpy. We teach that. It's all 16s in a row. Attendance. And it'll drop. It'll continue to drop until the week before the exam when it'll come up a little bit more. I know this for sure. And he won't be interested. He'll forget that he asked to have the mark rolled. The roll marked, sorry. He'll forget, because he's not really compiling the numbers. He's just being bureaucratic in all this. But I'm keeping the stats. It's just a simple number. That's it. Right, I don't have a break. We just go straight through. That's by popular demand. I have a deal with them. I say, look, we can go through the break if you want. We finish. Yeah. But there's a caveat to that. They're not allowed to complain. Because I've had it in the past. They've complained. The tutorial finished too early. So I can bore you to death. Sit down here. What do you want? What would you rather? Don't complain. I have a moral, an agreement in principle there with them. But my point is, in telling you this story, is that any statistic, any observer would give management of the university feedback that their model of delivery is broken, severely dysfunctional. Students are not attending lectures. If you don't mandate participation, they don't even attend tutorials. So when the majority of students, and it's supposed to be a class of 40, so it's immediately it came down from mid-30s, high 30s to the 20s, and now it's down to the teens, and it'll be down to single figures. As long as I get my one student, though, I'm fine. When it drops, sometimes I've had 3. It's fine. 2 of you can go. It's all right. As long as I get my.
The unit guide says the attendance is mandatory.
In which?
I think for this unit.
I'm talking about my first year one.
Oh, first year one.
No, this says it's no. No, it doesn't.
Oh no.
If you read the unit guide, it does not say it's mandatory. Go search and show me, okay? You show me. It's fine. I'm happy to stand corrected if you can give me the evidence. Find the evidence. Go look. It's interesting. Go look. My point is that students of today or at this university don't want to attend. With this first year unit, the first few times it was delivered, the original convener delivered the lectures, and I would attend the lectures, and I learnt so much from him, and his lectures were like 50 minutes, start 5 minutes in and finish 5 minutes early, Macquarie time. And they were very punchy, and he had lots of cool videos, and he explained the concepts exceptionally well. So it was superb delivery, and I'm busy making notes because I'm the tutor here, I'm supposed to know this shit. Well, I really don't, but if I I can learn, just like you. That's the beauty of being a teacher, is you're always learning, I learned a lot from him. But the attendance was very patchy in the lectures. So when he quit, out of frustration being the convener, he quit. He's still on staff, of course, but he declined to participate any further in this unit. They've just used the second-hand recordings, his recordings. And one can look at the statistics on the downloads, and one would find that maybe 5 or 10% of the students are actually downloading, listening to the recorded lectures. But how's that for giving up? So you pay for a unit, and what you get delivered to you is a series of available old 5-year-old echo recordings, what used to be the lecture, and then you're allocated to a tutorial where you don't have to attend. And the majority of students then don't. Then you have an online quiz that was originally in class, closed book, now becomes open book. So it's a search on Google. Have a good, two screens would be helpful, and a good internet connection, and it's a Google search, for the answer to each question. And you muddle your way through that, and then it's a Google search for the assignment. And then a 2 day before the exam, start cramming the material for the exam. How effective is that from a pedagogical perspective? Lack of interaction. It sounds ineffectual. It doesn't sound dysfunctional. To me, it seems broken. It's broken. When it needs to be fixed. In the first delivery, he's an educationalist. He's a specialist, the convener. Oh, he had everything mandated. Not only mandated, but participation marks. Where doing this quiz or doing this survey earned you participation marks. Being the speaker for your group, participation marks. We had green cards for the presenter, and you'd earn 10 marks. 10% of your score was participation. And there'd be lots of opportunities to be able to participate. That not only were tutorials mandatory, but the quizzes, which were like 25% of the marks, were delivered in the first 5 minutes of the tutorial, closed book, and randomized too. We had 6 different versions. Students thought we had 40 different versions, but we didn't. Only had 6. So the person next to you had a different version of the quiz. It's no use copying the person next to you, unless you could count 6. That person, but then they got mixed up anyway, so that wouldn't even work. It'd be random. It would be very random. No, he had it nailed down very nicely. But that all got thrown out. By the Department of Education delivers this unit. This is the department that teaches teachers. And any objective measure would tell you it's broken. So this is what I mean by a rigidity. That it inhibits change and becomes a weakness. They deliver in this way simply because this is more or less how we've always done it. We call this strategic drift. Well, we used to be strict, but students don't really like it so much. When they put in surveys, they'd like to stay at home and play computer games. Or would you like fries with that order? Minimum pay jobs. That's what they prefer to do. So we won't require them to come and engage. But then they don't do the assessments well. We'll fix that. We'll make them much easier. Open book. So that's called strategic drift, and it's a rigidity. It's a rigidity, and it can become a weakness because you believe your own BS. So we have threshold capabilities, a qualifier, a license, premises, things that are needed as a minimum to be able to compete in the marketplace. And then we have our distinctive capabilities that define the winners here. So in terms of resources, there are both threshold resources, minimum required, and minimum competences, but it's the distinctive ones that means we're going to succeed and not close down, not go bankrupt. So at the moment, we'll look at Ryanair, very capable airline in the budget space, but poor Virgin, they've got the threshold resources and competences. They've got pilots and planes and branding. They've got slots at our major airports. They've got the gates and the lounges. So they've got all the threshold, but they don't make any money. They're losing money for all of their partners, major shareholders. They're also publicly listed, and the share price has been dropping like a rock. But also, there are many airlines that have got big stakes in Virgin that are losing money hand over fist, because their distinctive resources and competences aren't there. They're competing against Jetstar and Qantas. And Jetstar has a distinctive advantage. We talked about this. What's distinctive about Jetstar? Low price. But do you want reliability? Do you want to be able to get from A and B on time? Do you want Jetstar to deliver on the contract? Is that an expectation? Do they do that? Generally speaking, yes. Yes. On time, exactly per the deal. If I ordered a meal will come. If I didn't, I've got to see what you've got if I'm really hungry enough, etc. You know, they deliver on the promise. So reliability at a low price, very low fares. Qantas, the full-service airline. You know, I flew Qantas London to Singapore, and I stop over Singapore back home. Everything was fine. I flew Etihad and stopped in Dubai, which was fun. But Etihad not nearly not nearly as friendly. It's because, again, a distinctive competence they're missing here in terms of the staff. The staff are pulled from all around the world. There's no cohesion in their staff. They're Europeans, usually Eastern Europeans, because Dubai just doesn't have the resources. And yeah? Okay. Okay, anyway, so what I'm talking about is that successful businesses deliver on their promise, and Virgin is stuck in the middle, according to Michael Porter's model. They're not really low cost, competing against Jetstar, not full service, competing against Qantas, not the range and capabilities of Qantas, the number of flights, the number of resources of Qantas. So core is a link set. We have to deliver customer value. We need to differentiate from our competitors to give the customer a reason to spend with us, potentially extend and develop as markets change. Yes, we have to change, of course, our competences. So in terms of the resource-based view of competitive advantage that we accept these days, is we have the model of Vario from Jay Barney, that our resources need to be valuable, rare, and imitable, and have organizational support. And we'll have a really good case study on this Formula One, where we see this very pronounced. Lewis Hamilton, Mercedes, the Mercedes team, come on, invincible. Daniel Ricciardo, yeah, he might be an okay driver, but jumping all over the place. From Red Bull, he's in Ferrari, is he now? From Red Bull to Ferrari and not succeeding at all. So you need this combination of value, rare and imitable, and have the team support to succeed. Value, take advantage of opportunities and threats, provide value to the customer. Rare, that is unique, it's hard to copy in it. So rare means that only you have it, a rarity. But inimitable means hard to copy, competitive, built on unique resources, sustainable. And I'll give you an example. We'll just finish this. So inimitability, in terms of expanding on that, it can be complexity, that people find it hard to imitate the complexity. It could be your internal processes, how you do things, like a chemical plant, for instance, very hard to replicate without huge expense. But a very good example, and I was reading an article, Tim Cook's going to have to decide what to do. If you look at the external linkages, the example is Apple, of course. Apple, the way they assemble the iPhone in China with Foxconn. And the linkages are very strong to the ecosystem of component suppliers across the world. And Trump is really trying to discourage business in China and to move that ecosystem out of China. What Tim Cook, it was going to be very difficult, what he's done is with the Mac, he's actually moved the Mac Pro, $6,500 US Mac Pro, is actually assembled in the United States. He's done that to appease Trump. They don't sell many of them. The margin is huge anyway. Components are very specialized. It's not a huge hit to bring the components and assemble them in the United States.
But the components are not from.
Of course not. Still from Japan, from South Korea, Germany. They still come from all around the world, the components. But just assembled in America to keep Trump happy. But that's destroying the external linkages, which is an inimitability. And then, in terms of the causal, we want it to be ambiguous, unclear, that the linkages are unclear. Your supply chain is unclear to your competitors. Because this is a major source of strategic advantage. It could be the characteristics are ambiguous too. I'll try and find an example of that. Because that's a more difficult one. We've got a good example. So it could be that tacit knowledge is unclear. So how do the designers in H&M, how do they decide on what's going to be fashionable? You'll read it in your case study. It's actually very, very unclear. It's very complex in environmental scanning and everything. You have Donatella Versace as an example, and she's always over the top. Versace is always very colourful. Lots and lots of colour, very gaudy. You know that's Versace. It's over the top. And your jacket looks like Burberry, you know. It's the conservative British check. Burberry is very conservative, yeah? Yeah, so they have their styles, each of the designers, but with H&M, it's very ambiguous here. How? It's where it is tacit knowledge gained from years of experience. And will AI be able to replace that? Maybe not. We'll see. I think one of the last things that AI will be able to do, one of the first things it will do, is explicit knowledge. So how do radiographers diagnose a breast cancer from looking at mammograms? They must be looking for certain things, patterns. They must be. And a computer must be able to do it faster and more accurate because a computer doesn't get tired. And a computer will learn from its mistakes, whereas we have the confirmation bias. If you diagnose a tumor and it's not there, it'll come. It's nascent, but I'm right. I'm always right. So we have the bias, the selection bias, the confirmation bias of humans. The computer will go, oh, did I get that wrong? That goes in my database. I don't care. No emotion attached. Computer doesn't care. So that'll be the first, but this will be the last. So this will still remain inimitable. And of course, our culture. And our culture are our taken for granted activities, the things, how we do things around here. But it does create a path dependency, which creates a rigidity.
What is path dependency?
That our path becomes dependent on our culture and our history. A dependent path. Path is dependent on culture and history. Read the text. So, it has to have systems and support, and it has to have the organization. And we see a very good example here. So, organizational knowledge is specific. It can be explicit in our processes, in our manuals, but there's a lot of tacit knowledge, the experience of our people. You have to try and keep very good people, because when they leave, they take away all of this tacit knowledge. We have an aging workforce, and we've got the baby boomers who are retiring, but it's okay because investment returns aren't great at the moment, and so they usually want to boost their superannuation retirement savings. So they're kept on as consultants, high-priced consultants, to maintain this tacit knowledge. That's a win-win. For the retiree, get to continue working, and for the organization to continue to draw on their expertise. Batten Grover used this Vario analysis, Vario model here to look at information capabilities, their role in competitive advantage, and doing an empirical study. It's a very, very good study. Go and get that from the library. And what they found was that the resource-based view does work for information systems, and it's actually the relationship capital of the IT manager. So, if the IT manager has got very good relationships with the business leaders, is that of value? It's very valuable because it means that they can work together, that the business can help to identify and confirm opportunities, ITOs, that IT can then pilot and progressively implement on that opportunity. It means that the organization will use the system that's being developed. It won't become shelfware. So the relationship is valuable. Is this common, that there's a strong degree of respect, mutual respect, a good strong relationship between IT and the business? Is this common? Yes or no?
Historically, no.
No, it's not. It's not common. So it's rare. If the IT manager moved to another organization, would he or she have that relationship with the business people? No. As we saw from that very early on Broadbent and Kitces, we saw that it's actually a cycle. It's a cycle of initial credibility. We give you some money. If you deliver, you get more credibility. You get more money. And you have this virtuous cycle. Or it's a downward cycle of, you didn't deliver, so we're going to cut your budget further. And, CIO, career is over. We have revolving doors for IT managers here at this university. They don't last more than a year or two. Career is over. Because under-resourced, no organizational support, not a priority, and we just limp along. So it's inimitable. And by definition, it's supported by the organization. So Batten Grover showed that the relationship capital was the key strategic advantage, competitive advantage that could be gained through IS, working together in identifying the right projects that the organization is interested in, which means that they will be well resourced and that they'll be used, and then they can be iteratively developed. So another way of looking at capability is our value chain, and we saw from Porter's value chain model in ITEC 871 that there are primary activities and there are support activities, but competitive advantage can be analyzed in any of these activities. It's not as if the primary activities are more important than the support, but as long as for instance, our use of IT adds value to either a support activity or primary activity, then it has a business value. So this is Michael Porter's value chain model, that we have primary activities. So from an IT perspective, inbound logistics would be our warehousing system. So we have to know what goods have arrived, book them in the system. We have to know where they're located so that we can pick them. We have operations, which could be manufacturing, service delivery. Here operations would be student enrollment, fee collection, student graduation. We broke down completely with operations last semester, part of service delivery is a discipline committee for cases of plagiarism, and they still haven't been resolved from last semester. So that's an operational failure. So just because it's operations doesn't mean it's done well. Organizations still are able to mess up operations. Outbound logistics, we love using our contract carriers with the tracking, etc. Marketing and sales systems. We're going to talk about CRM systems soon in ITIC 871. And then we have service, which is after sales service. And we have to make a margin. We have to make a profit on delivering this. But to support the primary activities, we need infrastructure, which could be buildings. We have human resource management. A lot of systems these days being upgraded with Workday. In HRM, we develop new things, new products, and we have to buy stuff. So we can use IT in any of the primary or support activities as long as they deliver value. So a set of interorganizational links and relationships to create a product or service. And again, it's the linkages within the value system. That's why we like ERP, because it integrates very, very well. And not having fiefdoms, not having silos here, and catapult hurls, as Michael Hammer talks about. We want to see it integrated, and those of you who did ITIC 832, we talked very much about business-to-business integration and the benefits that arrive, the value that's derived. So we have now not only integrated internally, EAI, Enterprise Application Integration, but we want to be able to integrate all the way through so that we see all the way through the visibility through the supply chain. And the Walmart Retail Link system, the example I give in ITIC 832 is an example where you can see your sales of your products in the Walmart store. And you can plan your inventory accordingly. So the value chain, it gives a description of activities. We identify those activities. We look for advantages here, where to enhance value. Sometimes enhancing value is about decreasing cost. So outsourcing, where we've got someone more capable, such as the university outsourcing to Gmail and to Microsoft for the email. That helps our competitive advantage because it lowers costs, increases our profitability, and increases efficiency. So we have to know where's the best area of focus in terms of cost-price structures across the value system. So Tim Cook knew he's adding cost to the Mac Pro by moving the assembly back to America, but the Made in America tag earns Apple kudos, political kudos. Tim Cook goes directly to Donald Trump. He doesn't use expensive lobbyists. So it gives him a way of pretending to meet, Trump's agenda. So again, that's a very interesting trade-off, is increasing cost for a political gain. Identifying where profit is in the system and where to exploit it. We know here where the profit is. It's overseas students. Well, we charge them 3 times as much. So it's exploited. Such that a recent report into the higher education system identified a real exposure of our universities to the dependence on Chinese students, interestingly. So the profit pools. Make or buy. And we see this with IT, very much more a buy situation than to code ourselves, because it's much more cost effective. And partnering. Who to create an ecosystem. And this is all application of the value system, the value chain. So we look at strategic themes, what are the critical success factors in the market, identify the clusters of activities that fit together and try to map them and see what's interrelated. So here's an example of a communications consultant. Given that they are communications consultants, it's not surprising they put together this very complex map, and it's very esoteric, it's very theoretical, it's very abstract as to how they work. Value-driven recruitment, freedom with responsibility, clear stance on integrity, working at a strategic level, use of in-house methodology, strong incentives for top performers, best learning opportunities in Scandinavia, according to us, So it's a bit of a pat on the back. But they're mapping their capabilities, and it looks good anyway. They've given some thought. Given some thought to developing their people, developing a best in class. Having a quality system is excellent. Yet I talk about here, and they were too scared to implement a system where students use their student card to at least swipe on when you come to the lecture theatre to measure attendance. And then all you'd have is an automated system to say, we notice you haven't attended. How are you doing with this unit? Or you attended, then your attendance dropped off, etc. And you should have a swipe on, swipe off, like the Opal card. And then we notice that you leave early, and just give feedback to the students and show that the organisation cares about their activities. You'd actually, the Hawthorne effect would kick in. That if you observe behaviour, you modify, you change behaviour, and you'd be giving some thought at least to the student experience. But we don't seem to care. So, relationship to the value chain, identifying strategic capabilities in terms of the linkages, importance of the fit, and finding activities that fit the Vario model, and eliminating superfluous activities. Supermarkets got very clever. They worked out that it costs them money to have checkout personnel. That could be a superfluous activity. We'll get people to self-checkout. Is it working particularly well for them? Not particularly well, because of the high degree of theft. And when Aldi was asked, I said, you've got to be kidding. There's no way we'd allow our customers to self-checkout. So that's an example where it was identified as a superfluous activity, but be careful in what you consider as being superfluous. I do like airline check-in. Everybody checked in recently? International flights? So the worst thing used to be about check-in is massive queues. Get there 2 hours early and spend an hour in the queue. I always would think to myself, if I arrived an hour early, I'd be at the front of the queue. How would they know? But I never really tested that theory. I guess I should have. The risk-return ratio wasn't there. The risk was too big compared to the return. I get there and go, checkout closed. Sorry, you've missed the flight. But what they do now is fantastic. What you do now is a mini kiosk. You scan your ticket. You get your boarding pass, you affix the label onto your baggage. You just have to follow the instructions. I'm always helping the people next to me. They can never work it out. I get them to hold the scrap of, backing paper. I take it off. Here, hold this. And then I put one on, and I get the other one and take it off. Here, hold this. And then they say, what to do with it? Do whatever you like with it. They don't give you a rubbish bin. So I put them in my back pocket usually. But when I'm helping someone else, I make them hold it, just for fun. But you put your own baggage tags on now, and you join a very quick queue where they still weigh it, don't you worry. They still check whether they can charge you more for excess baggage, but provided it's not overweight, it goes through. But the point is you get through very quickly. And they scan your passport, And it's quite funny with usability because each system is different, and each one, how you put your passport, where you put your passport, it's always different. So they have someone around, and he's not talking to me. Oh, you put it around this way. Oh, okay, no problem, I'm learning. So that's the airlines who've worked out it's superfluous to have check-in staff. We'll get you to self-check-in, which I loved it because it was really quick. So that's a win-win. It's not as if you're going to get a boarding pass without your passport scanned. It's not as if the machine is not going to do anything that the human wouldn't have done. And it's not as if they're going to accept any baggage either. They're going to weigh it anyway and charge you. So they're not taking on any further risk in their process, but just getting you to do more of the process, which I think would, because of the long queue, unnecessary. It's unnecessary. You should be queuing. I'd rather be sitting on the other side of the gate, relaxed with a coffee, than standing in the queue. So very good re-engineering. The systems are getting better. It used to be the IT systems were very slow. So they're getting better IT systems in terms of multiple logins, multiple users, much better concurrency, transaction processing, much better. So that's something to enjoy next time you're taking an international flight. You don't have to join that short business queue. You can get the value of economy and still have a short queue. So that's superfluous. So benchmarking is a very good idea. Benchmarking in the industry and the sector and best in class. British Airways benchmarked its refueling operations against Formula 1. Yeah, but it's a bit different. In Formula 1, you get this big can of gas and you put it upside down into the spout. I don't think you can do that with a plane. It's a bit different. So I'm not sure they're just comparable. But is our teaching best in class compared to other universities? Do we benchmark? Do we consider what is the global standard? We have a global audience. You've come from all around the world. Do we do that? Clearly not. Would it be a good idea? I think it would be. So the text is not silly. I use real-world examples, something we can observe and see, something we can all relate to show you that Johnson et al. Know what they're talking about in terms of strategy. And it's quite simple. Once you see the world through the eyes of your customers, because that's the only way a business has a right to survive. It's its customers that give it this right. And they withdraw that right. They take it away. Subway's disappearing. Can't give away a Subway. Some franchises are on the market for $1. Please take this off my hands and the continued losses because of the high rent I'm paying and the low sales I'm getting. We're not interested in Subway. It's not cool anymore. Hasn't changed at all. They're trying with wraps and things, but just not fashionable. So customers are fickle. They'll withdraw their support. And what's this about sweetened balls of tapioca? You're maybe a little bit too old to be obsessed by sugar-soaked tapioca balls.
In tea?
Yeah, pearl tea.
Oh. Yeah, I'm not drinking that.
No, you're not.
I am.
You are?
Yeah.
Where's your big fat straw?
No, they just come through this big.
They're small ones. Because normally you need a big fat ass straw.
Yeah, I told them I didn't want the seeds.
There you are. Yeah. But what's with that?
I think they're just a fad.
Yeah, you see? And they're springing up everywhere and probably cost them like 50 cents and they charge you $8? Minimum wage star.
They don't even taste that great.
And sometimes too, they purposely make the queue very long because they have a very complex process, eight-stage process to make the tea. in some of them. And people are really happy to wait for this bespoke, this customized, sugary drink of rubbish for $8. Boost, I would sort of understand. I mean, these fruit juices are expensive. It's a lot of fruit that goes into this huge thing. You know, it's probably half a kilo of fruit when you think about it, to juice it and everything. So you know it's not going to be cheap. But tea? Really? Tea? With tapioca? But they're benchmarking, they're sophisticated, and they're successful because they're giving the customer what the customer wants. So SWOT, we do a SWOT. We look at our internal strengths and our weaknesses, external, where the opportunities and threats. We can score against it in relation to competitors here and look at relative forces. Sometimes we can use it as a TOES matrix, which is exactly the opposite. TOES is the opposite of SWOT, and here's a TOES where we exploit our strengths and opportunities, generate options that use our strengths to take advantage of opportunities. WO, generate options here that take advantage of opportunities by overcoming our weaknesses, generate options that use our strengths to avoid threats, or generate options here to minimize and avoid threats. So, very common. But doesn't give you a priority, can be an overgeneralization, it's not a substitute for analysis, it's not used to guide strategy. And those of you who tried to use SWOT to solve the problem in ITIC 871 didn't get very far. Didn't work for you because of these reasons, these criticisms. Dynamic capabilities, that ability to renew and create strategic capabilities to meet the needs of changing environments. And I showed you how a lot of Australian universities are engaging in MOOCs, massive open online courses. So that's an example of a dynamic capability. They make no money in offering the MOOC, but they generate a capability and a reputation by doing it. So the more dynamic organizations have a better chance of survival. We need good sensing capabilities. We've got to be scanning the market. How does H&M do it? It's a very interesting situation because every season is new fashion, and even within the season they're constantly changing, iterating. I think a lot of it's trial and error. I think they've got very good ways of monitoring what works and what doesn't, and stopping what's not working and doing more of what is, because there's no clear-cut methodology to working out what's going to be fashionable.
McDonald's does that as well. Apparently they test out things in Australian market.
Okay.
Because apparently this market is more receptive to change.
No, good, yes. And maybe it's manageable too, smaller. But what we like may not be what the rest of the world likes. That's true too. So I think it's almost impossible to tell, and it's the strategy approach of throwing mud at a wall and seeing what sticks, which is a valid and a strategic approach. It's trying different things and see what gets traction. So you have to address it through new products, processes, and activities, not to be caretakers, basically, to be leaders, to be risk takers here. So reconfiguring new products and processes may require renewal, reconfiguration, capability, and investment in new technologies. So I think this is the last year I'm going to do my SPED 102. I think 7 years, it's just enough. It's just so stale. It's so old. The videos are so old. The mistakes are so clear, and nobody's fixed anything. Nobody's changed anything. I'll explain a trap to you. If you think that you can go through all the past exams and learn answers to all the questions, there's a trap there, because every year I put in something new. And I like to ask exam questions on what's new, because that's my reconfiguring, changing it up, revitalizing it. Because if it gets stale, the staff gets stale, customers are sick of it. So my wife's got this nail shop. She's mad about colours. She's just bought even more colours. She has this huge range of colours. I mean, we're talking about, the high 100s have been 500, 600, 700 colours. A lot of colours we're talking about. Not just 100 or 200. Because she wants to be new. She wants to show the high fashion of the shop, show the customers, wow. That's what she says. I want them to say, wow. Well, on the choice, the distinctive capability. She understands it. What sets her nail shop apart? Yes, you should. They should get good service from the staff. Yes, her prices are quite good, quite on the good side. That gets the customer in, but delivers something distinctive. She knows it. She understands it. This refreshment, this continuous investment. So internal capability development. You've got to continuously build and recombine a culture that promotes capability innovation. So what have we done that's been different? I told you I had lunch with Matt Bauer. And Matt was studying when I was doing my MTech, and he was doing his PhD online, and we were playing with his ideas with the postgrad. We had a postgrad certificate. No, a graduate certificate. It was a graduate certificate. It was if you didn't have an IT degree and you wanted to come into the MIT, if you did the graduate certificate, you had to be a graduate, but in a non-IT field. We taught you the basics of IT, and you got a graduate certificate in IT as a qualifier to qualify into a master's. So we had a good core of students, and it was a complete online delivery, and we were doing sort of the webinar thing, and we tailored it with a lot of individualism and quizzes and stuff, and we were pretty innovative at the time. So we were building, and so now he's a professor, and he's written texts on online delivery. And he agreed with me. The deepest irony is he's working in a complete laggard institution who has no interest in pursuing it. The next question is why he's still here. And he's still here because he couldn't get a job elsewhere. But I didn't pursue that. But this is this lack of building, recombining capabilities, leveraging capabilities, sharing best practice, and stretching, building new products or services out of existing capabilities, absolutely. So being dynamic. So we can do it externally too. Sometimes it requires a merger, an acquisition, an alliance. The tech companies are very good at this. Sometimes we have to cease non-core things to focus on what's important. We have to use metrics. We have to monitor our outputs and our benefits and develop awareness, training, organization learning. So we're doing all these endless student surveys, and our participation is just sinking right across the board in different departments, in undergrad versus postgraduate. It's about the only uniform trend completely in the university is students not attending, not engaging, not getting involved. Isn't that a metric that you'd want to be measuring and want to be doing something about it? It's obviously a multi-pronged solution is required. A multi-pronged of start to mandate engagement, to rebuild the quality, rebuild the brand. You must, and if you don't, then you fail. But then in the must, you can do it physically, or you can do it online, as long as you do it, as long as we have proof that you've done it. Show us you've done it. If you can't show us you've done it through completing the assessment, objective assessment, that you've done the work, then we assume you haven't. Therefore, you don't pass. So, you can monitor what's going on, and then you can learn what's important, and then you can implement, have a strategy. The strategy being of building engagement would be your high-level strategy. And then from a tactical perspective, you build in the processes to make it work. Very logical, rather than strategic drift, which is what's happening here. We're drifting like a boat without a rudder. Drifting. Not really. There's actually a purpose. The purpose is continuous facilitation, making it easier and easier and easier. Grab for market share. Comes back to governance. There isn't sufficient oversight and governance. So it's the stakeholders to whom we are responsible. So it depends on the structure of the organisation. So first of all, in terms of stakeholders, the owners of the business, they give us our purpose, our vision, our mission, why they've invested in our organisation, why the federal government has created our structure of universities as an example. So Macquarie University answers to the federal government, to the education minister. And we need to have governance, effective management, and it should be from an ethical standpoint. And these are very important influences of strategy. Our banks lacked both good governance and good ethics. And there was a Royal Commission that was so scathing. The pendulum seems to have swung too much in the other direction, and now the banks are being criticised about being too risk-averse and not permitting enough home loans. John Simons, who founded Aussie Home Loans, that is now a brokerage, I think, owned by Commonwealth Bank, and he said that the banks are too conservative now and not allowing sufficient home loans to stimulate the property market, home loan market. They're too scared of the regulator of ASIC now, gone too far after the Royal Commission. So stakeholders are those individuals or groups who depend on us. So we've got economic stakeholders, our suppliers, our shareholders, the banks from whom we borrow money. We've got social and political stakeholders, government agencies who regulate us. It could be that we have to meet certain technological standards. And we've got the community.
What about customers?
Economic. They pay us. So stakeholder mapping, identifying the stakeholder power and attention in order to understand the political priorities. Sometimes there's conflicts of interest. So an example, Lachlan Murdoch, investors in Channel 10, and they withdrew their support. Channel 10 was losing lots of money. Demanded and they all ignored her. Commercial TV and called streaming video on demand, leaving TV, and hence it's bleeding its advertising. Anyway, it went into receiver. They allowed it to go in receivership, and they wanted to buy it back on the cheap after it was in receivership, but CBS bought it. So that was manipulation, because by putting it into receivership, all the other shareholders, the public, those who own shares in 10 lost everything, lost their investment, and they thought to buy it back on the cheap, but CBS beat them to the punch. So conflicts. So it depends, because professional management might want to invest in growth, which might require more risk, and it might risk the stake that the original owners had in the business. In fact, going public requires a much higher degree of openness. Excuse me. So Aldi, for instance, is still privately owned. You don't have to. That's why we don't know its profitability. You don't have to publish your accounts, and you can keep it confidential. And it's a huge distraction of management in terms of shareholder meetings and all of the rules of disclosure, and having to manage for the share price, which is short-termism. This might be a conflict too, theoretically. In public services, yeah, we have huge problems in do you divert resources from standard services used by the majority to deliver for specialized services. This is usually not a conflict, because if you are a subsidiary, your responsibilities are to the parent, not necessarily to the host company, and because you'll lose your job very promptly if you don't obey what the parent says. But it could be, for example, our tech companies are evading tax. Google makes $1 billion revenue in Australia and pays very, very low tax because they're registered in Ireland, and they book all of the sales through Ireland, which is a tax haven. And a lot of jurisdictions are considering a Google tax, just taxing them flat 5% or whatever of their turnover. So that's an example of a conflict of interest. So stakeholder mapping, it's these key players who are very important. You have high power and high interest, high attention, and you have to keep them satisfied. So power is this ability of individuals or groups to persuade, induce, coerce others into certain courses of action. So we have power as a manager. So we have our hierarchical power based on where we are in the organizational chart. We can be charismatic, have influence, we can control resources. It could be that we know processes, have specialized skill. It could be we've got good negotiating skills, or our power to use discretion as to what strategy to implement. And the indicators within the organization is our status, our title. Out for external stakeholders too is their titles, what resources they control, what is the negotiating arrangements, and there are symbols, of course, of power. So attention. Stakeholders vary, could be critical, depends whether it's of key importance, depends on the communication channels, depends on their cognitive capacity. So for instance, we are terrible stakeholders in terms of superannuation, in terms of the money that's set aside for our pensions. Most of us don't know how much money we have in our superannuation accounts. We don't know how it's being invested, and we don't understand the fees that we are being charged. So because it's non-critical, if this is something that will pay for retirement in many decades to come, because the communication channels, we get an annual report mailed to us that we don't pay attention to, we don't bother logging in to the portals that are now available where you can have a look at how your finances are going, and because we don't understand what a balanced investment is, and we don't understand the portfolio approach, local international shares, bonds, infrastructure. We don't understand the investment products that are available. We're not making choices about how we're being invested because of our limited cognitive ability. And what happened is, universally, the superannuation industry has been ripping us off. I don't know whether you've seen the ads for the industry funds. Anybody know what an industry fund is? No? So do you know what superannuation is, what I'm talking about firstly? Yeah? In Australia, 9.5% of our salary goes into superannuation. It's a compulsory obligation of employers, set up by Paul Keating, Labor government, decades ago, to provide for retirement, especially with an aging population. And there's two types of funds. You've got private funds like AMP and the banks, IOOF, these big financial companies. And then because of the unions, we have industry super funds where it was established by the industry for the members, not for profit. So which are better? Industry funds or the private ones, commercial ones? If you look at the advertisements, the industry funds say they do better because they charge lower fees. But you know what the industry funds did? Is when they get so you are employed anywhere in Australia, the employer has to put 9.5% into super, and if you don't nominate a super account, they will just use the industry fund. So by default, many Australians have industry funds, and it was not a bad choice. If you can nominate now which funds. Not a bad choice to nominate industry funds because they do have lower fees. But what they did for every new member is compulsory life insurance. They just gave you life insurance and charged you a hefty premium for life insurance. And often you'd be a member of multiple industry funds, and each one would charge you life insurance. Now imagine you die. How many payouts do you get? Does each policy pay out? No. The rules of the policy are only one pays out. Also, if you're young and you don't have dependents, life insurance is not really worthwhile, not necessary. And it's a very unnecessary surcharge eating into the small contributions you have. And their premiums were not even competitive premiums. They were overcharging. So even the industry funds who purport to be serving the members, for the members, purport to having a high performance, low fee, even they were systematically ripping off their clientele. And now it's more an opt-in rather than an opt-out. So depending on the stakeholder, depending on these criteria, it does depend on how knowledgeable they are and how much they're taken advantage of. So generally businesses take advantage of you. An example has been data roaming. When you travel, mobile roaming charges are very expensive, aren't they? So now telcos have to tell you you're using mobile roaming, and they have to estimate, send you a message to tell you how much it's cost you. I went to Europe. I was away for 3.5 weeks, and I used my data like for Uber intermittently when I had to, and I made a few calls too, and I ended up roaming charges $35. No problem with that. Perfectly reasonable. But I knew it's $1 a minute when I'm talking, it's $1 per message, and the data, I don't know, $10 a megabyte or whatever. So turn it off, turn it on, Something like that, yeah. But Uber doesn't consume a lot. You just turn it on, book a car, see where the car is, send him a message, and turn it off. That's it. And then later when I'm in Wi-Fi, rate the driver, give him a tip. When I got back to the hotel, I logged back in. But my point is now, it was very, very manageable. I couldn't be bothered getting a European SIM and a new number, and it would have cost me €50 anyway, $100 anyway for the SIM. Need 2 SIMs, one for the wife's phone too, so that would have been $200. It's like 35, because now by regulation, they have to tell you what the charges are. But people didn't know what the charges were, and they would leave, software busy updating, iOS happily updating, everything updating, mobile roaming on, consuming gigabytes and being charged by the megabyte. And the cost of their telephone bill was more than the whole trip. Again, what we know. So regulation actually can help. So stakeholder mapping. Who are the blockers? Who are the facilitators? How do we deal with them? So we can, for instance, map our stakeholders. So in terms of the profit focus, it can sometimes be very exclusively profit and professional management. And then we have our major public companies here. Profit-driven professional management. It can be profit-driven, but personal management, entrepreneurial businesses. Entrepreneurs like Rosalind Cogan, like Richard Branson. It can be state-owned businesses, which can have professional management, but the aim is to provide public benefit here, and so not profit-driven. And many family businesses are not profit-driven. They're there to create jobs for the family and independence for the family. So different ownership, public quoted companies, the profit focus, state-owned enterprises, entrepreneurial businesses, family businesses. Not-for-profit as well, NGOs, non-government organizations are often charities, charitable foundations. There are partnerships, very, very difficult to manage, like law firms, and it can be employee-owned too sometimes. Different ownership models. So governance concerned with systems of controlling the managed, hold them accountable by those who've got a legitimate stake. So there's different roles of governance. Sometimes governance fails, like with the huge failure of Enron, the failure with our banks, major banks, and so we need scrutiny. We need accountability. You can't rely on professional managers to do the right thing. So even the industry super funds were doing the wrong thing. They knew their members had multiple life insurance policies, did nothing about it, and they knew that life insurance for young people is hardly worthwhile, and given the choice, most would opt out, but they just didn't give them the choice. It wasn't transparent. The telcos, the way they ripped off their customers with mobile roaming, many examples. Just bad governance, unethical. Because the incentives, managers are given incentives for short-term profits, drive up profits. So a misalignment of incentives. So the governance chain, in a small business it's very simple, do what the boss says, but in large publicly quoted companies they can be complex. And if we have a look, we've got the shareholders or the beneficiaries. They invest in investment funds. Investment funds sometimes have seats on the board. The executive directors have to are governed by a board, and then senior executives have to respond to the executive directors, and the managers to the senior executives. It's like a hierarchy of accountability. So we have this principal-agent model where as a manager you're hired to be professional, you are the agent, you are paid by the principal to look after their interests. But sometimes the agents may act in their own self-interest. It's a conflict in governance. For example, when I'm delivering my SPED 102, it's in my interest for the tutorials to be snappy and finish, to be succinct, but the organization would like a 2-hour delivery. So I'm breaching this correct governance. Don't worry, I've gotten into trouble in the past over this. I like snappy, not if the material's there, good. If the material's not there, then how am I supposed to stretch it? So agents will act in their own self-interest, not in line with the principal agent model. It's just human nature. So you need monitoring systems, basically. So The challenges are there can be knowledge imbalance, which makes it very hard to monitor the agents who know a lot more about the business, limits as to how much you can monitor them, and misaligned incentives. So you have to have the right metrics, and you have to have an alignment of incentives, basically. That we respond to the shareholders. They're the ultimate beneficiaries of the business. Institutional investors often do have a very strong role in strategy because they're major shareholders. And the board is sometimes asleep at the wheel, like with our major banks. The board had to be shooken up with Commonwealth Bank when they breached the money laundering requirements, the smart ATMs. It was like 50,000 transactions that should have been reported and weren't. Well, what was the board doing? How is it the board didn't know about this massive breach? And heads rolled. So you've got different models in terms of the stakeholder, like the private business, can look at long-term horizons, can be less reckless, can have better management. Often we see this with European companies are privately held. With a shareholder model, like publicly listed companies, they look for short-term, high rates of return, possibly increased innovation and entrepreneurship, and maybe better decision-making. But short-termism is a real problem. So boards, we're used to the single tier in Australia as well, UK, Australia, but they've got multiple tier boards in Europe, in Germany, France, the Netherlands. That's complicated. Management board plans a strategy, has operational control, whereas a supervisory board provides this wider range of stakeholders. We just have the supervisory one. We leave it to the executive managers to plan strategy because they're working full-time in the business and they have the knowledge and the capability. That's where they're hired. So how much should be delegated and how much should the board engage? Well, they should engage as much as necessary. They need to be independent of management. At the moment, we have a very interesting situation. Trump appointed Jerome Powell to head the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve Bank of America is independent of Washington, of the president, of the government. They are independent, and Trump keeps ordering them to drop interest rates, and they don't. And he appointed Powell, and he says, and he said in one tweet, he doesn't know who is the bigger enemy, Jerome Powell or Xi Jinping, the chairman of China. Oh, he's petulant. He really is. So that's an interesting example of independence. That the Federal Reserve is independent of the executive of the government, which is a very good thing. Very good thing, because they can't be influenced politically. It's the same thing. The board needs to be independent of the management. And of course, we have a triple bottom line these days. We have to deliver on social responsibility. So the triple bottom line is we have to deliver economically for our shareholders, but we have to deliver for our stakeholders in terms of our customers and our employees, but we have to deliver for the environment as well. This triple bottom line, so delivering for profit, economic performance, for our people, a social performance, and for the planet, and environmental. So this is good governance, if you can balance the three. Make money by delivering a quality service and treating your staff very well and your customers well, but also considering the planet. And ethics. What should you do if there's something unethical? Should you resign? Should you ignore it? Take action? We need much better protections for whistleblowers. They often ruin their careers by highlighting the bad behavior of their organizations. Texas Instruments got some very good guidelines here, very simple. is the action legal? If not, stop immediately. Does it comply with our values? If not, stop. If you do it, would you feel bad? How would this look in the newspaper if you know it's wrong, if you're not sure? Very good. Very good questions for social responsibility. So questions of corporate responsibility, employee welfare, good working conditions, good job design, protection of intellectual property, and protection of the planet. So a quick overview of our distinctive strategic competences, resource-based view of strategy in Verio, and a look at stakeholders and governance. Let's take a break, but if you want to use the time effectively, have a look at H&M. We'll be reading H&M case study and answering questions on how H&M can leverage IT.